You've been kidnapped.
Alright, ma'am, need to calm down.
Okay.
Alright, take a deep breath. What do you mean your baby's been kidnapped?
I just got a twig. My son up. My garage door was wide open. My house to my door was wide open, and my baby's gone out of the crib.
How old is your baby?
My baby is 5 months old. Oh, God, help me.
On June 27, 1997, in Florida, United States, Sabrina Eisenberg was born to Marlene and Steve Eisenberg. She was the youngest of 3 children, with 2 older siblings, William, born in 1989, and Monica, born in 1993. Marlene and Steve married in 1987 and were both working in the real estate sector, which allowed them to settle with their children in a comfortable 4-room ranch-style house in a residential area of Valrico on the outskirts of Tampa, Florida. Those who knew the Eisenbergs described them as the picture of a perfect family, and they were overjoyed when Sabrina was born. Sabrina quickly became the center of attention, and her older siblings adored her. She was described as a cheerful and calm child. According to Marlene, Sabrina began sleeping through the night soon after her first month, making her an easy baby to care for. By November 1997, when Sabrina was just 5 months old, she had started crawling. Marlene, with William's help, would encourage her to move on her own, and the family captured tender moments on video, unaware of the tragedy that would soon unfold. On November 23, 1997, life in the Eisenberg household proceeded like any other. It was a quiet evening, and Marlene put Sabrina to bed, covering her with a blanket, turning off the light, and leaving her peacefully sleeping in her crib. After spending time with her other children, Marlene and Steve decided to head to their own bedroom to rest. Before going to bed, Marlene made a quick visit to Sabrina's room to check on her one last time. She was reassured to see her daughter sleeping soundly. Early the next morning, on November 24th, just 3 days before Thanksgiving, Marlene got up at around 6 a.m. to wake her older children for school. However, as she walked through the kitchen, she noticed the garage door was open and the door leading from the garage to the porch wasn't locked. Alarmed, she immediately checked on her children. When she entered Sabrina's room, she was met with a terrifying sight. The baby was gone. The blanket that Marlene had covered her with the previous night was missing too. Marlene screamed, waking Steve, who rushed to her side. Together, they searched the entire house and the yard, but there was no sign of Sabrina. At 6:42 a.m., Marlene called 911 to report her daughter's disappearance. In a frantic and breathless voice, she explained to the operator that her 5-month-old daughter had vanished from her crib. The 911 call was recorded and played at the beginning of this video. Within minutes, Sheriff's Office agents arrived and cordoned off the scene. They began searching the area while taking the testimonies of the parents and neighbors. Hours later, FBI agents and officers from the Florida Department of Law Enforcement joined the search. With the help of volunteers and trained dogs, they scoured a nearby forest, looking for any clue. Helicopters were deployed to conduct aerial searches, and forensic investigators combed through the house, searching for evidence. During their investigation, authorities discovered an unidentified blonde hair and a shoe print near Sabrina's crib. They also found 7 fingerprints from unknown individuals in different locations around the property. Despite these clues, Sabrina's whereabouts remained a mystery, and the family's seemingly perfect life was thrust into the center of a criminal investigation. Almost immediately after Sabrina's disappearance, posters began circulating with a photo of the baby and a description stating they were searching for a white girl, 5 months old, weighing 9 kilograms with blue eyes. The description detailed that at the time of her disappearance, Sabrina was wearing lavender pajamas with a floral print, and her blue and yellow blanket with animal figures and trim was also missing. That same night, Steve and Marlene appeared on television, reporting their daughter's alleged kidnapping and begging for her safe return. The following day, specialized divers joined the search effort and began combing a pond near the Eisenbergs' home. By then, investigators had started to grow suspicious of the couple. Their statements appeared contradictory and their behavior didn't align with that of parents whose child was missing. Authorities noted there were fewer photos of Sabrina in the house compared to her siblings, and no evidence of forced entry, nor a ransom note or any phone calls demanding money. Their suspicion deepened when a home video recorded shortly before Sabrina's disappearance revealed that the baby had visible bruises and was missing a lock of hair. FBI agents and sheriff's officers subjected Steve and Marlene to intense interrogations. The first topic they questioned them about was the open doors, to which the Eisenbergs explained that their neighborhood was considered safe, and they sometimes left doors and windows open overnight. Police raised doubts, however, as neighbors had reported several attempted break-ins in the area recently. They also asked how it was possible that an intruder could enter the house and take Sabrina without waking anyone. Furthermore, they were puzzled that the family's dog Brownie hadn't barked during the incident. The Eisenbergs explained that they had slept in the master bedroom, which was far from the children's rooms, so they couldn't have heard anything from that side of the house. At this point, Steve and Marlene realized that investigators were treating them as suspects, so they hired renowned lawyer Barry Coe and stopped answering the authorities' questions. A neighbor later came forward, telling police that on the night of Sabrina's disappearance, his dog had woken him up, prompting him to let it out. When he opened the door, he claimed to have heard a baby crying. He initially downplayed the sound, but later reconsidered when his wife informed him of Sabrina's disappearance. In his statement, the neighbor noted that there was no fence between his property and the Eisenbergs, allowing anyone to walk through easily. After her husband's death, the neighbor repeated his account to a private investigator hired by the Eisenbergs. Despite this, detectives maintained their focus on the parents. On December 12, 1997, the State Circuit Court authorized the installation of listening devices in the Eisenbergs' home and the interception of their phone calls. The affidavit provided to the court claimed the police had reason to believe that the Eisenbergs had either killed or sold their daughter. The court approved the request, and on December 13th, detectives installed electronic devices in the family's home in Valrico. Unaware of the new surveillance measures, the Eisenbergs continued to seek public assistance and kept their case in the media spotlight. On December 22nd, nearly a month after Sabrina's disappearance, they held a vigil attended by dozens of people, which attracted the attention of television networks and news programs. On January 9th and February 6th, 1998, police requested an extension of the surveillance, basing their request on supposed transcriptions from the initial wiretaps. A pediatrician had allegedly said Sabrina had a bump around one eye and was missing a lock of hair. The family's hairdresser reportedly also stated that Sabrina was missing hair at the time of her disappearance. In one audio recording dated November 23, 1997, Marlene allegedly told her husband that the baby had died and that Steve had told her there was nothing he could do about it. The two were said to have argued about how to avoid prosecution. As investigators continued gathering evidence against the Eisenbergs, on January 30, 1998, they were subpoenaed to testify before a grand jury. The couple invoked their Fifth Amendment rights and, although they were forced to appear, refused to answer most of the questions. Police had recorded the couple for 79 days, and by March 2nd, they had collected 2,600 conversations across 55 audio recordings, which investigators claimed were irrefutable proof of the Eisenbergs' guilt. By this time, Sabrina's disappearance had become national news, one of the most notorious cases in the country. After the media frenzy became unbearable, Steve and Marlene moved to Steve's childhood home in Bethesda, Maryland, hoping to escape the press and provide a quieter environment for their older children. However, their new life wasn't easy. They struggled to find employment and continued to face suspicion from the community, which had not forgiven them for the alleged crime. Things worsened on September 9, 1999, when a federal grand jury indicted Steve and Marlene for conspiracy to make false statements and 6 counts of making false statements to law enforcement officers during the investigation. The couple was arrested in Maryland, with Marlene facing a 30-year prison sentence and Steve potentially serving 20 years for allegedly conspiring and lying about their daughter's disappearance. However, they were never charged with causing Sabrina's death, and the case against them began to collapse. In February 2000, the Eisenbergs filed a motion to suppress the recordings and transcripts obtained from the wiretaps, arguing that they were based on false statements. A year later, in February 2001, a judge ruled that investigators had lied in their request to install the microphones in the Eisenbergs' home and intercept their phone calls. The judge found that most of the audio recordings were inaudible, and the statements made by the pediatrician and hairdresser had been misquoted or taken out of context. None of the recordings matched the transcripts of the couple's conversations, and therefore the judge ruled that they were not valid evidence against the Eisenbergs. In July 2001, Marlene and Steve were acquitted of all charges. The lead prosecutor was downgraded in 2003, and the Eisenbergs' attorneys filed a civil lawsuit against the sheriff's office and federal prosecutors for malicious prosecution. Initially, the Eisenbergs were awarded damages between $2 million and $900,000, but the amount was later reduced to $1.5 million. The couple sued again, accusing prosecutors of conspiring to deprive them of their civil rights, lying and fabricating evidence. In 2004, the case was dismissed, and the judge ruled that prosecutors had immunity from such lawsuits. 2 years later, a similar lawsuit against the sheriff's office was dropped. Meanwhile, the investigation into Sabrina's disappearance had stalled until April 2003, when a woman in Michigan saw the missing persons poster and noticed a resemblance to a girl living in Illinois. When the Eisenbergs were shown a photo of the child, identified as Paloma, they agreed she resembled Sabrina. Reports indicated that Paloma had been taken to Texas across the Mexican border by a teenager who claimed to be her mother. The teenager handed the girl over to a woman named Molly Garza, who was about to be deported to Spain. Molly left Paloma with a friend who worked at an immigrant clinic, and the girl was eventually adopted by the sister of the clinic's nurse. The couple in Illinois who raised Paloma attempted to adopt her legally, but could not due to missing documents. They were assigned legal guardianship while they sought to identify her parents. Unfortunately, DNA tests revealed that Paloma was not Sabrina, and her true parents' identity remains a mystery. In August 2005, Marlene and Steve Eisenberg met with detectives from the sheriff's office to discuss the case of their daughter Sabrina, and offered to cooperate with the police, who were looking to reopen the investigation. Both were questioned once again and underwent polygraph tests, although the results were never released to the public. Steve and Marlene maintained that they passed the tests. The case took a new turn in 2008, almost 11 years after Sabrina's disappearance, when an inmate named Dennis Byron claimed to have information related to the case. According to the informant, his partner, Zelda Scott Oberbeck, who was incarcerated on weapons charges, had been paid to retrieve a boat containing Sabrina's body and dispose of it in the sea near the Courtney Campbell Bridge in Tampa. Sabrina's parents were interrogated once again, but they publicly stated that the informant's claims were false, as they never owned a boat. This was never confirmed by the police. Time passed without any further clues about Sabrina's fate, but her parents did not stop their efforts to find her alive. Colin McNally of the National Centre for Missing and Exploited Children created an age-progressed image of Sabrina based on photos of her older siblings, which was periodically updated to show how she might look as she grew older. After almost 2 decades since Sabrina's disappearance from her crib in Tampa, Florida, her parents were faced with the possibility of having found her. In addition to the Paloma incident, at least 2 young people came forward claiming they believed they were Sabrina. One of the girls, who contacted Marlene via social media, was close in age to Sabrina and shared a similar birthday. She also felt there were gaps in her past, as there were no childhood photos of her, and she had recently discovered that her social security number was linked to a woman in California. However, this potential lead was ruled out. Despite continuing with their lives, the Eisenbergs hold on to hope of one day reuniting with their youngest daughter. The family has registered with several DNA databases in hopes of finding a match. In their Maryland home, they maintain a room that serves as a sanctuary, containing baby clothes and toys that Sabrina never used. A photo of the little girl is displayed throughout their home. At the time of this video's broadcast, Sabrina would have been 27 years old. In recent years, there has been no progress or updates regarding the case. Sheriff's police officials have stated that the investigation remains open and that they are still searching for Sabrina. The National Centre for Missing and Exploited Children continues to update its age-progressed photo to help show what Sabrina might look like now. Meanwhile, despite their loss, Marlene and Steve have continued with their lives in Maryland, working in real estate and creating a website and social media profiles to offer their services. Their older children, William and Monica, are now adults with their own families, but as Marlene has said, they never forget their sister and continue to hold out hope that one day they will find her. The disappearance of Sabrina Eisenberg, when she was just a 5-month-old baby, became one of the most media-covered cases of its time, due in part to the suspicions surrounding her parents and the questionable actions of the police. What happened on the night of November 23rd and the early morning of November 24th, 1997, remains a mystery. We can only hope, as Marlene Eisenberg expressed in one of her recent interviews, that Sabrina was taken by someone who raised her with the same love and care that they would have given her. Now that you know Sabrina's story, the torment her family endured, and the twists and turns of the investigation, what do you think? Do you agree with the actions of the authorities, or do you think they were right to suspect the family? Share your thoughts in the comments. Katya was born on March 13, 1990, in El Salvador and was the first daughter of Hilda Maria Jimenez and Edwin Antonio Miranda Mendez. The family lived a happy life, which became even more joyful 2 years later with the birth of Katya's younger sister, Gina Marcela Miranda Jimenez. While they weren't wealthy, their economic situation was stable, and they were well respected in their community. Much of the family's respect stemmed from Edwin's position, as he was the son of Carlos Miranda Gonzalez, a military officer. Following in his father's footsteps, Edwin joined the Salvadoran Armed Forces, and by 1999 he had risen to the rank of captain. He was head of logistics for the Presidential General Staff, responsible for the security of then-President Armando Calderón Sol. Hilda, meanwhile, was a devoted mother and active in their local Catholic church. Together they built what seemed to be a stable and harmonious home for their 2 daughters, who were 9 and 7 years old when the tragic events occurred. In late March and early April 1999, during Holy Week, Hilda had numerous commitments with the church while Edwin planned to take some time off to visit his family. On April 3rd, Edwin took Katya and Gina to his father's beach house at Los Blancos Beach in El Salvador. Hilda didn't join them initially, as she had obligations, but later spent the afternoon and part of the night at the beach house. When it was time to leave, Hilda wanted to return home with her daughters and husband, as she had more church activities the following day. However, according to some reports, the couple had a disagreement because Edwin insisted on staying the night at the beach house with the girls. Reluctantly, Hilda agreed, returning home alone and planning to come back after completing her church activities the next day. Hilda wasn't entirely comfortable with leaving her daughters behind, especially since there were about 20 people at the house, including family members and employees. Although their grandmother, Rosa, was there, Hilda worried that her daughters wouldn't get the necessary attention amid so many people. However, since several military personnel were also present, she reasoned that her concerns might be an overreaction. Not only was Edwin in the armed forces, but his brothers were as well. Godofredo Miranda was a sub-commissioner and deputy chief of the Criminal Investigation Division of the National Civil Police, while Jorge Miranda was a captain in the Salvadoran Armed Forces. That night, everyone went to bed as usual. However, in the early hours of April 4th, Katya's lifeless body was discovered on the beach, just a few meters from her grandfather's house. Later, Hilda received a devastating call from Edwin's family, informing her that Katya had allegedly snuck out of the house during the night to go swimming and had drowned. Initially, Katya's death was recorded as a tragic accident, one of many during the busy holiday season. Hilda buried her daughter, heartbroken and confused, unable to comprehend how her obedient child had ventured out alone in the dark. Katya was always respectful of rules and would never leave the house without permission. Hilda couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss, and she resented her husband for insisting on staying at the beach house that fateful night. She blamed his stubbornness for the tragedy that had taken their daughter away. As time passed, Hilda grew increasingly suspicious of the story provided by Edwin's family. It just didn't add up, and the more she thought about it, the more determined she became to uncover the truth about what really happened to Katya that night. She began to urge the police to conduct a more thorough investigation, as revealed by Edwin's later statements to the officers. When night fell, several relatives chose to camp out to keep Gina and Katya company in the large house. Edwin borrowed a tent from Carlos, but his tall frame wouldn't fit inside, forcing him to leave the door open for comfort. This oversight is what seemed to allow Katya to leave the tent unnoticed in the middle of the night to go to the sea. Hilda was unconvinced by this explanation, noting that the tent was situated within Carlos's property, surrounded by a spiked fence, and she had 2 trusted men guarding the area, making it virtually impossible for Katya to escape without being seen by any of the 20 guests in the house. As the investigation began, it emerged that Katya had died during the early morning hours, yet authorities did not arrive on the scene until 11 a.m., leaving several hours for the body and crime scene to be potentially manipulated. This irregularity, along with many others, went unreported to Hilda and would have remained concealed had she not insisted on further inquiries. Witness statements revealed that Carlos's employee had moved the girl's body, supposedly due to rising tides that posed a risk of dragging her away, as it had been left on the beach. Moreover, Katya's white shirt and shorts, what she had worn to sleep, were returned to the family instead of being collected as evidence by the attending experts. Carlos further complicated matters by ordering the clothes to be washed, erasing any DNA, hair, or physical evidence that could clarify the circumstances surrounding her death. One of the gravest issues, in Hilda's and the investigators' view, was that no forensic officer was responsible for transporting the body. Instead, Carlos took it himself from the beach to the forensic medicine offices for the autopsy. This was more than mere negligence. Given the professional background of Katya's paternal family, filled with military and police personnel, they understood the importance of not tampering with the scene, her clothing, or her body. When questioned about these occurrences, Godofredo, Katya's uncle and a deputy commissioner of the National Civil Police, offered a barely believable excuse, claiming he had ordered 2 officers to secure the site, but they had disobeyed, resulting in the scene and Katya's body being mishandled. However, reports indicated that such disobedience was virtually unthinkable within the ranks. As Hilda's requested investigation continued, another unusual development arose. Forensic personnel did not collect evidence from the scene until a month later, which logically yielded no valuable findings for the investigation, further raising suspicions about attempts to conceal the truth. Additionally, the tent where Katya, Gina and her father had slept that night was removed from Carlos's property and relocated to another house, which then mysteriously caught fire. Rumors suggested that the fire was intentionally set, but authorities could not substantiate these claims. Throughout this ordeal, Hilda was consumed by grief over the loss of her eldest daughter and suspected foul play, though she had no idea how the eventual forensic report would illuminate the situation. When the autopsy results were finally released, after significant delays, they confirmed Hilda's suspicions regarding the true cause of Katya's death. The post-mortem examination ruled out drowning. Instead, her lungs and trachea were filled with sand, indicating that she had died of asphyxiation. Additionally, the examination revealed bruises and signs of trauma in her private areas, suggesting that in the midst of an assault, the attacker had pressed Katya's face into the sand to stifle her screams until she suffocated. With the chilling details of the autopsy in their hands, it became clear to investigators that they needed to find Katya's assailant. The Miranda family soon began to alter their account of the events surrounding Katya's tragic death. Statements from several of Edwin's relatives shifted the narrative from an accident to an act of revenge against the family, citing their connections to the police and military, as well as Carlos's wealth. Those who stayed at the beach house during Holy Week claimed that everyone felt strangely sedated that night, suggesting that someone might have exploited this to abduct Katya. Amid growing doubts, Hilda decided to separate from Edwin, believing he played a role in the dark scheme that had devastated her family. She organized demonstrations to raise awareness of her daughter's case and demand justice. On December 9, 1999, 8 months after Katya's death, authorities finally conducted a reconstruction of the case, something that should have happened immediately after the incident. Hilda consistently accused the prosecution of fostering impunity due to their negligent investigation practices. The case was marred by irregularities right from the inspection of the crime scene. Hilda's relentless fight bore fruit in 2000, when arrest warrants were issued against Edwin for abandoning his daughter and against Carlos for sexual abuse and murder. Additionally, 2 farm employees were arrested for their role in covering up the crime. However, justice faced a parallel investigation led by Godofredo with permission from his superiors. In stark contrast to the negligence exhibited in the official investigation, Godofredo operated with alarming efficiency. By May 2000, as the court case against his father and brother unfolded, he had developed a theory in which his relatives were not implicated. Determined to utilize all available resources and contacts, Godofredo even created a PowerPoint presentation that circulated among prosecutors, journalists, and human rights organizations. This presentation alleged that a gang led by a man nicknamed the Stick, who had an old feud with Carlos, had sedated the entire family, entered their home and taken Katya's cell phone. Carlos, in turn, claimed to the media that the investigations conducted by Godofredo were connected to a land dispute with a man named Doroteo Maradiaga. From that moment onward, the entire Miranda family adopted this narrative. When other members were called to testify, they went so far as to claim they had felt drops in their eyes, purportedly the sedative used by the gang members. Godofredo successfully influenced the media to portray the Stick as the actual perpetrator of the crime. But this alternative investigation was never formally presented in court due to a lack of evidence. Nevertheless, it achieved Godofredo's aim of swaying public opinion to lessen scrutiny on his father and brother. Despite their arrests, Carlos consistently denied the charges, asserting that he had been framed by Doroteo Maradiaga, who had long wanted to harm him. The Miranda family even found a witness who was supposed to support this theory. However, at the last moment, this witness admitted he had been paid by Katya's grandfather to provide false testimony. Ultimately, despite the prosecution's case against them, both Carlos and Edwin were acquitted due to a lack of evidence linking them to Katya's death. The verdict sparked a campaign to find those truly responsible for Katya's death. In response, the Human Rights Institute of the Central American University, IDUCA, launched an independent investigation into the Salvadoran judicial system. The director of the institute told the media they aimed to highlight procedural failures and flaws in the investigation, vowing to pursue justice for Katya, her mother, and her sister. Their report revealed numerous irregularities, including the judge dismissing the testimony of the first rescuer on the scene, considering the statements from the Miranda family more credible. The same judge repeatedly delayed witness testimonies, failing to follow up on critical statements, such as that of Katya's aunt-in-law, who noted Edwin had kissed Katya that night, not as a father, but as if she were his girlfriend. 2 years after his niece's murder, Godofredo was promoted to head the Anti-Narcotics Division, DAN, a position he held for 8 years. In 2009, just days before the legal deadline to reopen a criminal case expired, Carlos was brought back to court, not for the earlier charges but for kidnapping, since he had been acquitted of the first allegations. On this occasion, the Attorney General's office apologized to Hilda for the previous actions and ordered the arrest of Katya's grandfather and 6 others involved in her death. During the advance evidence hearing on November 24, 2009, Hilda testified that Carlos had orchestrated the kidnapping of his granddaughter to frame an old enemy. Allegedly, Carlos had taken Katya while she was sleeping to hand her over to a group of criminals, intending to incriminate his rival. However, when the gang believed Katya was dead, they rejected the deal. Carlos then supposedly altered his plan, abusing and suffocating Katya when she regained consciousness. Despite the trial, Carlos's defense maintained there was a campaign against him, claiming a double persecution for actions already adjudicated. The prosecution countered that new facts had emerged, and they were pursuing charges of deprivation of liberty rather than homicide. In 2011, Carlos was found guilty and sentenced to 13 years and 8 months in prison, but in 2014, he was released when a reviewing judge determined that Katya's case did not meet the criteria for kidnapping and ruled that a person could not be tried twice for the same offense. Carlos Miranda, Katya's grandfather, passed away from natural causes in October 2018. In April 2024, Katya's mother honored her daughter's memory with a mass at Sagrado Corazon School, where students created an altar in her honor. 25 years after her death, the latest updates on the case surfaced in April 2024, revealing that the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights was reviewing the matter and had requested a report from the Salvadoran government. Since 2007, the case file had been presented to the Commission, detailing the numerous irregularities and negligence in the investigation, leading the family to believe that the Salvadoran state had failed Katya Natalia Miranda Jimenez. It was alleged that after Katya was raped and murdered, the state did not conduct a diligent investigation to clarify the facts and punish those responsible. The report also emphasized that this lack of action resulted in violations of the human rights of her family members, particularly her mother, Hilda Maria del Carmen Jimenez, and her sister, Gina Marcela Miranda Jimenez. Now that you know the full details of this case, we invite you to share your thoughts on the alleged perpetrators and the justice system's actions in the comments.